Prosseguindo, para fecharmos a programação desta manhã, nós receberemos agora, na palestra sobre a virtude do egoísmo, o craque, grande também, que me lembro que quando comecei a conhecer mais sobre Ayn Rand e objetivismo, vi muitos vídeos dele discutindo com esquerdistas em universidades, o presidente do conselho do Ayn Rand Institute, Yaron Brook.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be back in Brazil. So I know that all of you, everybody here in the audience, cares about. Don't put the lights so dark. I need to see people. Like I can't see anybody back there. Ah, perfect. Thank you. This is not a movie theater where we need dark in order to see the performance. I'm not going to dance, I promise. I know that everybody here, including the people in the back in the dark, everybody here cares deeply about liberty and cares deeply about freedom. Many of the questions we're going to get, oh God, I assume this weekend are being about politics and about how do we change the world and how do we do it faster and how do we do it slower and do we buy Bitcoin or shouldn't we buy Bitcoin and all of that. So I want to ask you a question. Why do we care about freedom? What is liberty good for? Because the fact is that everybody outside doesn't care about freedom. Certainly not like we do. So why do we care about freedom? What's the purpose of freedom? What's good about liberty? I mean, because this is part of the challenge that we face is we all assume it's an intrinsic good. We know it's good. It's wonderful to be free. Who doesn't want to be free? Everybody doesn't want to be free. Pretty much. So why? Well, what is it we want? Why do we care about freedom? Is it we want higher GDP? Anybody here, we want to get richer. So we know in freedom we can get richer. We'll get, instead of getting iPhone 14, we'll be an iPhone 33, right? If we were free. Yes, that's why we value freedom? Yeah, I mean, to some extent. I want to be richer. I want to live in a world that's richer, right? But why do I want to live in a world that's richer? Well, partially because I'll be richer. And my life will be better. So it's not just that. What else? Why else do we want to live in a free world? Why do we want to live in a free world? Yell, if you want. But in English, because I don't understand Portuguese. So that you can pursue values. Pursue values free of coercion, free of force, free of somebody regulating you, telling you cannot start this business, or you can start this business, but you're going to have to fill out paperwork for 3 years, and then they'll give you permission to start a business, right? So you want to be able to pursue your values when you want to pursue them on the basis of your skill, ability, talent, who you can convince to support you, without some bureaucrat deciding what you should or shouldn't do with your life, right? So we want to be richer. We want to pursue our values. Anything else?
We can be ourselves and pursue happiness according to our values.
Yeah, we can be ourselves and pursue happiness according to our values. Nobody can impose their values on us if we're free. We get to choose the values for ourselves. We get to choose how to pursue them. And we get to benefit when we achieve them. And we live in a world that's richer. So we have more upside in terms of our material wealth. And
freedom and respecting others, freedom.
Well, that's what freedom is. Freedom means we're all free. It doesn't mean just me, I'll be free and you guys will be my slaves. That's not freedom, right? Freedom means we're all free. So notice all the things that you have said. All the things that you have said basically boil down to, I want to be free because I want to have a better life for me. I want freedom, I want liberty, because I value my life, because I want to pursue my values, because I want to be happy, because I want to pursue my happiness. You're a bunch of selfish. Now, this should give you a hint as to why people outside don't necessarily want to be free. Because what is the moral code that we are all taught? What does it mean to be a good person? Does it mean to pursue your own happiness and pursue your own values? Is that what your mother's taught you? I want that mother, if there's a mother like that in the... There you go. All right, we got one. We got a winner. My mother didn't teach me that. What does it mean to be moral? To be good? To be virtuous?
Sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice. Altruism. It means don't think of yourself. Altruism, which means otherism, which means to focus on others. It means don't live by your values, by your standards, for your happiness. I mean, every mother wants their kids to be happy. But they don't teach you to pursue your happiness. They don't advocate for that because that would be wrong. That would be morally wrong. Morality tells us, religious morality, secular morality, across the board, all different religions, almost all different secular philosophies, all tell us that what we should be pursuing is other people's interests. What's important is other people's wealth. What's important is other people's happiness, not your own. We're taught from a very young age to sacrifice, to give. What does sacrifice mean? To give up our values. To not be too ambitious. To not be too self-interested. To not think of ourselves first. To think of others first.
Or that there are some intrinsic values.
Well, there are intrinsic values, so there's something external to us that we must pursue, but it's always for them. So sacrifice to God, sacrifice to the state, sacrifice to the poor, sacrifice to fill in the blank, to the leader. But it's always sacrifice to, never about my happiness, never about me. And if I'm going to sacrifice to something else, then freedom is not that valuable. Because they're going to tell me what to do anyway, and I have to do it. That's what it means to be right. That's what it means to be good. And this is why our arguments in defense of liberty, in defense of freedom, this is why libertarian arguments, free market arguments generally fail, because they fail to acknowledge the fact that implicitly they must rest on an idea of egoism, on an idea of self-interest, on an idea that the reason to pursue freedom is because we're trying to pursue our own life, our own happiness. And this is why Ayn Rand is so important of a thinker. Because she doesn't start with the politics. And she doesn't end with the politics. She presents a whole philosophical foundation for it. She says she's an advocate for capitalism because she's an advocate for egoism. And she's an advocate for egoism because she's an advocate for what you just heard, reason. So it's a whole philosophical framework from which to understand the importance of liberty, the importance of freedom. Not to take it for granted, not just to assume it, but to understand where it comes from and what are the philosophical requirements, the base for it. And of course, I think of all of those, the most controversial is this idea of self-interest. And people are so uncomfortable with self-interest. They're so uncomfortable with the idea of egoism. They reject it. And by rejecting it, they reject freedom and they reject liberty. So what does it mean? what does it mean to say, as Ayn Rand does, by the way, this is the new book. I think you all got a copy, right? I'm not going to try to pronounce it in Portuguese. Virtude do egoísmo. There we go. I heard some All right. It's a beautiful book. I don't know if you've looked inside. It's gorgeous. The photographs and everything, they really did a good job. The virtue of selfishness, the virtue of egoism, the virtue of living for yourself, for your own life. Now that is a revolution in ethical thinking. I mean, their predecessors who've thought about virtues to make your life the best that it can be, going back to Aristotle. But in modern times, nobody. What does she mean? Well, she means living for your life. She talks about the fact that all of us, all human beings, face a fundamental, basic, crucial choice between life, what's the opposite of life? And death, existence and non-existence. All animals face that choice. All living things face that choice. Plants face it, people face it, animals face it. But what makes us special? What makes us different about this choice? Is we don't have it programmed automatically how to choose life. All other living beings know exactly what to do. They know what are the requirements of their life. But do we know what we need in order to do? Is it instinctual? Do we just know it? No, we need to engage in thinking. We need to actually engage in reasoning to know how to live our life. And if morality is to guide us, morality is a set of values to guide our life, to help us choose between right and wrong, replace right and wrong between life and death, then morality is there to teach us how to live, how to pursue our survival, how to pursue our life, how to pursue our thriving and flourishing as human beings. It's there to teach us what values we should pursue because they lead to life, and what vices we should avoid because they lead to death. That's the role of morality. And what Rand says is, well, we should look at reality to figure out what those virtues are. What leads to life? We've got, thousands of years of human experience, of human life. What are the things that lead to human success, human life, human flourishing? And what are the things that lead to death and destruction and horrors? Well, what is the most important thing that we need in order to be alive? What is the thing we have to do in order to survive as individual human beings and as a species? Think. Before producing, we have to think. You can't produce until you know what you're producing. How many of you have the gene for hunting? No, you don't. You might think you do, but you don't. Nobody has a gene for hunting. What do you have a gene to do? Think. Which means what? How does that lead to hunting? It's not just that we don't have the gene for hunting. Certainly she doesn't. Are you going to run down a deer or a bison and bite into it? And, we don't have fangs. We don't have claws. We're slow. We're pretty weak. Even those of you who work out every day, you're pretty weak in the scale of biology, in the scale of the animal kingdom. You're not going to go up against a bear or a lion or any of these things. Right? You and the saber-toothed tiger. Who's going to win? Well, you are. Why? Because you can think, which means what? You can build weapons. You can devise traps. You can communicate with other people so you can work together to catch him. So you can use your mind to overcome the fact that you're so weak and that you're not programmed to know how to deal with the saber-tooth tiger. So thinking is how we survive. Thinking is how we produce all the values that we have, as Yaron described. Right? This is what makes us human and what allows us to survive as human beings. So for Rand, thinking is not just an epistemological tool, nice to have, put it out here. We do it when we encounter problems sometimes, right? And sometimes we don't, depends how we feel. No, this is our means of survival. This is what we need to use in every aspect of our lives. And this is what it means to be moral. To be moral is to think. To be moral is to be rational. To be moral is to use reason. So morality, because it's about my values, my life, my survival, my flourishing, requires me to do the thing, that makes survival as a human being possible. Think. Really, if you had to boil Ayn Rand's morality, if you had to boil selfishness into one concept, one virtue, that would be think. Be rational. Use reason. That captures almost everything about it. So the virtue of selfishness is the virtue of living your life based on your mind, based on your thinking. And thinking, reason, rationality means based on reality, based on facts, based on evidence, as Yaron just described. So, thinking is to be selfish is to be a thinker. Notice that that's not the common view of people out there about what it means to be selfish. What do they usually think about when they think about selfishness? Stepping on other people, exploiting other people, taking advantage of other people. What's that? Oppressing, right? Abusive. Note that to the culture at large, morality is always about other people. So even when they're trying to interpret selfishness, they're interpreting in terms of other people. We haven't even got to other people yet, right? We're still talking about egoism, what it means to me. I need to figure out what I need to do in order to survive. I don't know about other people. We'll see in a minute, right? But to survive, I need to think. We'll talk about, I need to produce. I need to do certain things. But they automatically go to, well, how does that, if you're being selfish, that must mean you're being nasty to other people. You're being bad to other people. Because they can't even conceive of the idea. They can't even conceive of the idea of being selfish, of being an egoist, of what that would mean and what that could conceive. Altruism is so ingrained into them. It's so part of the fabric of what's being taught out there of who they think they are, that they have to demonize egoism. They have to demonize anything that's perceived to be selfish. So why isn't it selfish to exploit other people and to abuse other people and to do all that? Is it? Well, in a sense, they have a right to be selfish as well, right? So it would be weird to have a universal morality that says, be selfish, you should think of yourself, but other people don't. It's just you, right? Either morality applies to everybody or it doesn't apply. It's not universal. It's not a morality then. But then, in terms of your own life, does it make sense to exploit other people? In terms of actually being self-interested. What's that? You sacrifice your own independence. But you know, that's way too sophisticated, even an argument, right? let's just take from a material perspective. What is the best way to get rich? What's that? To trade. And to trade, what do you need? You need to create value, and then what do you need? Other people. You need other people. You can't trade with the air. You can't trade with, I don't know, God. I don't think. So if you're going to trade, which is the way we know we better our lives, because we know we've read all the economics books about the division of labor and specialization and all of that. The way we better ourselves materially is through trade. Then do we care about other people? Yeah, and when are other people going to be best in terms of producing value so we can trade with them? When they are free. But morally, when are they best? When they're rational and when they are self-interested. When they're pursuing their own values. They're going to just be better at what they do when they love what they do. So I'd rather trade with somebody who loves what they do and is very good at what they do and pursues what they do with integrity than trade with somebody who hates it and is being told and is sacrificing and is bored by it. It's just not going to be as good of a product. At every level. Right? So we benefit from other people. You can see it in societies that oppress their people. How much do they produce? A lot less than societies that live their people free to pursue their own values, to pursue their own lives, right? So the more you oppress people, right? Because egoists, they say we want to oppress people, but if we oppress them, they won't produce. If we oppress them, we won't be able to trade with them. If we oppress them, it's bad for us, just on a simple material sense. And it's true, it undermines our independence because we become dependent on them, right? If your slaves are doing all the work, you're not dependent on the slaves. But at the very basic foundation, we all understand, because we understand economics and politics, we understand that oppression is not good for a trading relationship. So it doesn't take that much to see that demanding that, doesn't take much to see that egoism is not about oppressing other people. It's not about lying, cheating, and stealing. Lying, for example, how many of you have ever lied? I don't want to know. I mean, if you've lied before, and I'm sure you all have, it sucks. There's nothing good about it. You don't get anything from it. It's complicated. You have to lie in order to defend the lie. I'm at the age where I can't remember if I lie. I can't remember the truth, put it this way. I can't remember what actually happened last week. Now imagine if I lied about what happened last week, right? Now I'd have to remember two things instead of just one. But it's not even two, because I'd have to remember the truth, the lie, who I told the truth to, who I told the lie to. And I have to make sure they don't talk to each other. I mean, there's no, you can't hold it. I can't hold it anyway. It's too complicated. It's a lot of work. And that work is destructive, because any work you do that doesn't lead to more success, doesn't focus on your values, is a waste. And the one thing you don't have time in life for is waste. Life is short, way too short. So any time I'm trying to think, oh, who would I tell a lie to? Wow, I could be thinking about something productive. I could be making my life better in some way. Instead, I'm just defending. So lying doesn't make any sense. Stealing, you're going to get caught. Nobody's going to trust you again. And every one of these examples that people give about what selfishness is, they're not selfish. And every one of them is worse for you. It makes your life worse, not better. So self-interest, selfishness, egoism is about your pursuit of your values. It's about figuring out how to live the best life that you can live. It's about recognizing the fact that life is short. Recognizing the fact that you never get a minute of your life back. And embracing that fact. And designing your life, taking control of your life, using your mind, using your reason to take control of your life and make it the best life you possibly can. That's what egoism is about. And it's not at the level of self-help. You know, there are lots of self-help books out there that tell you this and, you know, you do these 5 steps and you do the, and a lot of it is very good. A lot of it is actually good advice. But it doesn't stick. And it's not just that it doesn't stick, it doesn't change the culture in any significant way. Why? Because the assumption is you're all supposed to be altruistic. And then there's a part of your life where, yeah, you have to pursue your own values because otherwise people feel bad, so they want to pursue their own values, but they're conflicted because they're also altruistic, and they're trying to solve this. But what Ayn Rand is giving you is a foundation for doing all that self-help. The foundation is a moral foundation. Foundation is the permission to pursue your happiness. The fact that that's your purpose on earth. Your purpose in life is you, your life, your flourishing, your happiness. So I encourage you to read the book. We covered one virtue, which is being rational, but there's 7. You can ask about those, but they're all in the book. You can read them, but they're all aspects of rationality. They're all rationality applied to different parts of your life. But the fundamental is, it's your life, and when you advocate for freedom, what you're really advocating for is egoism. And if we don't bundle the two together, if we don't see the two linked, we can never be successful in our advocacy for freedom. Thank you, and I'll take questions. All right, I like answering questions more than I like giving talks, so I left plenty of time for questions.
Hi, Yaron. Thank you. Regarding the aspects of thinking, my main questions also connects to Aaron's first address before you. How can you avoid the trap of being, I would, in a lack of a better word, rationalistic instead of rational, and denying or neglecting aspects that are embedded in culture that are hidden in political and also even things that were brought through time that were misunderstood and mistold by generations, so we can judge reality and understand better, not to be rationalistic in terms of our judgment of things.
Okay, so to avoid the question being rationalistic,
yeah,
this is what it is right now. No, wait.
Yeah, sorry.
I want an example. What do you mean?
I mean,
example.
you gave some examples about self-help books.
Yes.
If you take the Bible, for example, and there are some aspects in regarding moral and habits and costumes that they were brought and they were brought from history to now, and they are preserved as somewhat important, even that it's politically important for some groups and to control and instead. But how can you distill those things and maybe not neglect wisdom and have to...
Okay, so what do you do with old wisdom that, how do you evaluate it? How do you assess it? Well,
yeah, instead of being, I mean, because just to end my question, I noticed that many people that begin understanding ideas of objectivism, and even most of the critics, they tend to criticize based on a rationalistic view. I mean, it's not possible, based on a wrong philosophy, indeed, but they tend to look in a very shallow way of thinking.
So rationalistic means detached from reality.
Thank you.
Rationalistic means detached from reality. So what you want to do is bring reality into it. What you want to do is connect it to reality. So let's say there's certain things about the culture you like. Certain things about Brazilian culture that you really like, but you want to know how to evaluate them. How to evaluate them. Are they consistent with objectivism or not? Well, then you have to look at reality. Why do I like them? Do I like them based on facts or just because I grew up like this and it gives me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, but they're really bad, right? So you have to really judge them and evaluate them. We've got, I don't know, you want to know why these things. So I don't know, you might think, well, why do we have to reinvent the wheel? We've got the 10 Commandments in the Bible. No, I know. They're pretty good, right? Humanity survived for a long time with them. How do we evaluate them? Well, first thing you should be suspicious of is the commandments, right? And we don't believe in commandments. Everything needs to be proven. Everything needs to be shown. If somebody says, thou shalt not something, why? Why shalt I not? So you have to be able to resurrect the reasoning behind it or create the reasoning behind it, right? So everything needs to be connected to reality, connected to fact. And so anything good in the culture, anything like that, has to be connected to fact and make sure that it's not just emotional, right? And it's hard because you grow up in a particular culture and you might ultimately reject parts of that culture. But emotionally, you're still connected. So it takes work to actually figure out what's good, what's bad. What do I like? Do I like it for the right reason? Just because I got a positive emotion, does that mean it's really good? Right? Emotions lag. Emotions don't change like this. When you change your evaluation, your emotion doesn't just change like that. Like you fall in love with somebody, you're madly in love with them, and then you discover something bad about them. It's emotionally very difficult to detach the love, right? The love takes a while for it to go away, even though you know they're bad for you because they've done something bad. So emotion take a while to catch up with your reasoning. So you have to make sure that you're reasoning it through, you're logically thinking it through. Yeah.
Hello, Yaron. Thank you very much for being here with us. So many people think that at the end, everybody is selfish because they have this idea that everybody acts to from a worse situation to get to a better situation. So this is very typical also with the Austrian economics type of thinking, that
Sure.
you act to be in a better situation. So even they will say, well, Madre Teresa de Calcutta or Jesus Christ act in some way, in a selfish way, because they think they are better after they act. So how would you explain what is a real selfish and who is not?
So to know what is good for you, so first of all, I think to be selfish is a huge achievement. And it's an unusual achievement because it requires real work and real thinking. It's not, as I started out, as I said, it's not obvious what's good for you. It takes work. So it could be that a lot of people out there want to make their lives better emotionally and in a short run, and they pursue short-run things that make their life a little bit better. But that's not what's required to actually make your life better. You actually have to figure out long-term, what are the things that are going to improve my life? So you actually have to give it real thought and real effort and real work to figure out what your life requires, what your values require. And then, of course, you know, these examples are ridiculous. When you look at somebody like Mother Teresa, who was miserable, and as I think almost all altruists are, then you can see that if she pursued her self-interest, she failed big time. She didn't achieve it. But she didn't pursue her self-interest. It's an insult to Mother Teresa to say she pursued her self-interest because she tells us exactly what she was doing. She articulates it. She's clear about it. She is sacrificing her life for God, for religious commandments. And she's doing it not because she thinks it's good for her, but she thinks it's her duty. And you see people out there all the time doing things that are clearly not in their self-interest because they're not thinking or because they're being taught and they're committed to some false idea of a pursuit of certain values. So Mother Teresa, she's been taught about religion, so she pursues religion, even though it's destructive to herself. But most of the people out there, most of the people living regular lives who are not philosophical, they're not thinking long-term about what's good for them. They're not. They're living from moment to moment. Nobody's taught them to reason as man's basic means of survival. They think, they pursue their emotions. They pursue the stimuli that they have. Yeah, there's a sense in which when they trade, they're trying to be better off. They're trying to improve their life, but in shallow, very superficial kind of ways. And then they might when they trade, pursue, try to make their life better. And when they choose a career, they might do what their mother tells them. Right? Or they might do what their preacher tells them. They might not use their own judgment to evaluate. They might be miserable. They might pursue a career where they're completely and utterly miserable. So they're not consistent. And yes, I mean, the Austrians will say, well, if they did what their mother tells them, it's because what their mother tells them is more important to them than, the career they actually want. No, there's a science to this. It's not subjective in this sense. It's not whatever you feel like. It would be the equivalent of saying everybody eats the food that is best for them because that's what they eat, and therefore it's best for them. But we know that's not true because there's a science that says, we think, some foods are good for you and some foods are bad for you. We can't always agree which are which, but we know there's a science, right? The science might be primitive, it might not be advanced enough, but we know some things are good, and even if I feel like eating poison, it's still poison. It doesn't matter. So there's a science of evaluating human nature, a science of determining what's good for human beings and bad for human beings, not just materially, food, but also spiritually. And yes, I might feel like doing things that are ultimately bad for me, but then I'm not acting self-interestedly. Right? So there is an objective nature to human being, and therefore objective requirements for human survival and thriving and flourishing. Yeah, go there. Is it a follow-up on this question? Yeah, I know, but is it a follow-up? Sure. How much? Okay, we'll extend a little bit. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just because I've been to Mother Teresa in Calcutta, and when you said it was choice or for God or something, I think sometimes it's not personal choice because like she was given by her parents or by someone to a Catholic institution, and for her it was like survival. And the year I've been there, she was the year she won the Nobel Prize, and people leave children, babies at the door, and I think it was maybe a choice not for her happiness or anything, but it was a matter of survival, for hunger, for the Indian situation, for poverty.
Yes, I don't
think they had the choice.
Oh, I think
Maybe
she
I'm
always
wrong,
had a
but-
choice. She came from a middle-class family. She had a choice. She didn't have to go to India. She could have stayed where she was born. She could have done a million different things. She was a smart lady. She chose to give all of that up. She chose to give up a life in order to live for other people. And she, if you read her diary...
Isn't that selfish of her?
No, it wasn't selfish of her because she suffered. And it wasn't selfish of her because she didn't do it for rational reasons. She didn't evaluate her various choices and say, this is my career, this is what I love. There's nothing wrong with helping other people. There's nothing wrong with being a good social worker. But that's not why she chose it. She chose it, and she says it. If you listen to her speeches, if you read her diary, she says, I did it out of a sense of duty, without choice, duty, and not rational, not based on my reason, not based on, but because
isn't that a choice?
It's a choice. This is the point. Not every choice is rational. Not every choice is good for you. You can choose poison. Mother Teresa chose poison. As a consequence of choosing poison, she was miserable. She had a horrible life. And she didn't really help people. I mean, if you actually study what she did, she prevented them from dying, but she believed that they should stay poor because your meek shall inherit the earth. So it's good to have a lot of poor people. So in every respect, Mother Teresa was not a good human being.
I had the wrong impression. Sorry.
She's not a good human being. No, this is a good issue. It's a good issue. Because only objectivists will say Mother Teresa wasted her life. Mother Teresa lived a horrible life. Mother Teresa is not a good human being by any standard. She's not a model for anything. She's a model for what happens when you pursue faith on faith, which is the only way to pursue faith. And you should reject that. It's not living a full, complete, whole life is about rationally choosing values and rationally pursuing those values. It's not about any values that you choose, but it has to be rational values, values from the perspective of how do I make my life the best life that I can be? How do I thrive as a human being? And that's not the process Mother Teresa took. Yeah.
Hi. So when you asked about like what motivates you to, in the beginning of the lecture, like why do
we care about freedom?
Why do you advocate for freedom? I heard a bunch of answers, and like what really motivates me is to reduce poverty, because I believe that that's the most practical way to reduce poverty. And so that kind of got me thinking, like, would Ayn Rand think of it as like, you got it all wrong, because this is not really a selfish motivation as I see it. And I don't know, it got me a little...
So let me ask you this. So imagine, so let's take Scandinavia. Scandinavia has a model that basically, in Scandinavia, there are very few poor people. Basically, all the poor people are subsidized by people who have something. Everybody's mediocre. Everybody's kind of in the middle. Everybody's in the middle class. There are no real rich people and there are no real poor people. So they solved the problem of poverty and everything's fine. So is our advocacy for liberty and freedom just get to Scandinavia, or is it something more than that?
I know, we have, like, Brazil is a really, really poor country. So when you look at that, and that's why I got involved into politics, is mostly for those people, not just for myself, because I think all of us here have a comfortable life, pretty much. So it's kind of confusing for me to perceive that being morally wrong, or because it's not for myself.
I think it's a bad motivation. And I want to reduce poverty. I care about poor people. I don't want there to be poor people. It's easy to solve Brazil's problem of poverty. It's a shame that it's not being. I want there to be no poor people. But I can't say that's my primary motivation. My primary motivation is I want to live in a place that's free. I want to be able to do what I want to do and to live my life. And I love other people, and I want other people to have the same opportunity to live in a place that's free. And I sometimes say in my talks, just to be provocative, I don't care about the poor. And there's a sense in which I don't. I care about good people. Some of them are poor. Some of them are middle class, and some of them are rich. What I care about is your virtue, not your socioeconomic status. I'm not a Marxist. So, the real tragedy of statism is what it does to ambitious poor people, right? But some poor people deserve to be poor. So it's virtue that I care about, and the reason I want to live in a free world, because a free world rewards virtue. It allows virtuous people to live the best life that they can live. Some of them will be poor, some of them will be rich. It doesn't matter to me. I care about human beings, and I don't evaluate human beings based on how rich or poor they are. Now, I understand living in Brazil, you have poverty right in your eyes. It's right there, and it shouldn't be there. There's no reason for it. And all you have to do is liberate for it to go away. And yeah, that's a motivation, but it can't be the only motivation or the primary motivation. And look, the other thing I'd say is this. We live comfortable lives, and there is this sense, and I think one of the reasons that the movement doesn't grow faster is that life is pretty comfortable. Why bother? Why get involved? Why advocate? Because life is, I don't want life to be comfortable. I want life to be great. I want life to be unbelievably good. And for that, I want more. So yeah, you live in a nice place in São Paulo, in a nice, I don't know, apartment that's big and beautiful, and you have nice things and all of that. But you're stuck in traffic for 3 hours every day, right? And you have all, poor people, and when you start a business, you have to fill out 1 million forms and get permission from some bureaucrat. And there's 1 million different, and you send your kids to schools that are, at best mediocre. Even the best private schools are mediocre. And you compromise on so many things, but it's comfortable. But what you should want is not comfort. What you should want is greatness. What you'd aspire to is to live a great life. And for greatness, you need freedom.
Thank you, Yaron. I love your explanation on how hard it is to lie, because then you have to remember who do you lie to. So it got me thinking, if lying is so hard, how come the biggest lie of them all keeps being alive, even with science, which is religion, like how they manage to perpetuate the lie?
Yeah, because so lying can be, emotionally comfortable for a while, right? So it's the easy way out, and religion is the easy way out. Religion says, I'm not going to struggle to figure out the answer to this. I just read a book and it'll tell me everything I need to know. I'll just be mindless and let somebody imprint their values. So it's laziness. It's intellectual laziness, but it's also, and the consequences are horrific. I mean, we could get into a whole thing about religion, but there's nothing good in and of itself that comes from religion, but it perpetuates itself because to overcome it requires effort. It goes back to effort, right? Everything good requires work, requires effort, requires using your faculty of reason to judge the world, to evaluate it, to challenge it. And people would rather not. Now, if you go back 1,000 years, then religion kind of made sense because people needed an explanation. They needed something to explain the world. They had no explanation for it. They didn't have science. So religion was a primitive form of philosophy. It was a primitive form of, here's some answers. Here's a way to think about the world. Here's a way to live. Here's a way to do things. But that was 1,000 years ago. And since then, we have science. And we now understand the world. Now, we don't understand everything. Science hasn't given us all the answers. Right? But now we understand that we can understand. And we understand the methodology to understand. But again, that requires work. It requires relying on your own ability to think. It requires, and a lot of the same thing with just everyday lying. I mean, lying telling the truth requires a certain courage. It requires dealing with your emotions, but also dealing with other people's emotions, right? It's hard. It requires effort. Telling the truth is not just about telling the truth, but it's also about discovering the truth, figuring out what's right, which requires effort. So all of this requires actual work. Now, it's work that's unbelievably rewarding. If you do it, the benefits are huge. But sadly, we live in a world which has taught us not to do the work, and to be super sensitive to emotions. Now, I love emotions. Because there were some questions, we're all for emotions. We're all pretty emotional people, as you can tell. I'm pretty passionate, right? But emotions are not tools of cognition. They don't tell me what's right or what's wrong. They tell me about me, not about the world, about my values, about what's important to me. And that sometimes is right and sometimes is wrong in a sense of, I don't like this emotion because it's not consistent with what I think my values are. So maybe it's based on some bad conclusions I've had. We don't have direct contact with the source of the emotion. But emotions are great, right? But, you know, we've learned to use emotions as tools of cognition and sometimes other people's emotions. So I don't want to upset you. So I'm going to tell you a lie not to upset you. Right? But there are consequences to that. And the consequences are almost always bad, right? So it's laziness, it's intellectual laziness, it's a lack of commitment to reality and facts and evidence in your own mind. And we live in a culture, I was just thinking of this today, so I'm reading a book about the new right and kind of the collectivism that's growing out of the right now, not just out of the left. And we're just not ready as a species for individualism. Yes. There's just something that you have to build up. So collectivism and religion and all this have thousands of years of built-up traditions. It goes back to what he was saying. You know, you built up traditions and culture, and everything's kind of and a mythology and stories and belief systems. And we're like this super young thing that happened about 250 years ago in the Enlightenment that said, oh, individuals matter. And we should really think about individuals and liberty and freedom. And like, we haven't built the body of work to support it. And so as soon as we hit a problem, right now we're hitting a problem with, I think the problem we're hitting right now, in my view, is the crazy left. The left has gone completely nuts, completely insane, woke, whatever you want to call it. And we're going, wait a minute, this is insane. This can't be right. So what instinctually do they go to? Oh, well, let's go back to all those mythologies and traditions and collectivism, because then we didn't have a woke left. So that must be the right interpretation. So this is why, you know, my view is the woke left can't win, because we'll always go, we'd rather have that collectivism than their weird, completely insane, nutty thing. But to go from that to say, no, you have to be rational, you have to think it through, you know, you have to be egoistic. There's no way to go there because it's too young, it's too new. It doesn't have enough of a standing, enough of a cultural presence. So it's too early, way too early for us to win. It's possible one day, yes. I'm not going to say when. Okay, we're going to take one more because he's been standing. All right, last one.
Hello, Yaron. I would ask you about if you think it is possible to win if you think it is possible for capitalism win the battle, the political battle without selfishness win the moral battle. But let me ask you: can you elaborate your point in your video that the right is becoming postmodernist? I will take the opportunity because when you were commenting about Alexander Dugin,
yes,
you said a comment in this line: the right now is becoming postmodernist.
Well, Dugin is postmodernist. I mean, he says he's postmodernist.
If you can comment about it, I will appreciate it. Thank you.
God.
I'm sorry.
So let me answer your other question because it's easier. Yeah. No, capitalism cannot win unless we win the cultural battle for egoism first. So it has to be the culture. Politics is downstream from culture. Politics is downstream from culture, and culture is downstream from philosophy. So we need to win the cultural battle first. Then we'll win the political battle. And if we win the political battle first, it won't last. Right? We won the political battle 250 years ago, right? The founding fathers of America, they won. Argentina was a capitalist country for the 19th century, but it didn't last because it can't last if the culture's against it. If the culture is moving against it, it can't last. So you have to win to sustain it. You have to win the cultural battle. To win the cultural battle, you have to win the philosophical battle. That means you have to win egoism. With regard to the right, look, the right has no answers to the left. It's why the left keeps winning. The right has no answers, philosophical answers to them. So what can they do? They can use the left's philosophy, postmodernism, to advocate for the right's mysticism, which is exactly what they do. So they take the philosophical tools of the left, because they don't have any philosophical tools of their own. There are no right-wing philosophers. Think about it. There are no right-wing philosophers, real philosophers, philosophers who actually have an epistemology. And so what do? They take the philosophy that's being developed, postmodernism, which is the common one, and they use it to advocate for what they really want, which is mysticism. And postmodernism and mysticism go hand in hand beautifully. This is why in the end, the left is mystical. The left is not pro-reason. The modern left, the woke left, the collectivist left of today is not pro-reason. The old left pretended to be pro-reason. The new left doesn't even pretend anymore. Reason is out. They hate reason. So I think all the political alliances are going to change. I think everything right now is in motion, and we need to be very careful who we perceive our allies to be and who we perceive our enemies to be, because I think it's all shifting right now. And it's going to be really interesting. The next 10 years are going to be really, really interesting in terms of the political realignment that is happening globally, not just in the United States, but globally. The challenge is that the good guys, there are very few of them. Thank you. I'll be back later.